Hold on, boys. It's time for some underage sex debates. I fucking hate this push to talk shit. All right, who wants to fuck kids in here? What's going on?
Well, okay. I'm not actually gonna tell
When
you.
am I going to put as an announcement for this debate?
No. Fuck. Just do this quick. I don't want to. This is gonna
Yeah,
be
it should be
five
over in
hours.
like
Okay,
4
okay.
minutes. Yeah,
Alright,
so
9-year-olds
Alright,
they're
so
mature enough
one
to
interrupt,
fucking
just let
adults.
them get their points through so we can run through this quicker.
Yeah, go for it.
yeah, so I mean, obviously that you would think that there's an age of consent, right? No matter what it is. I mean, you think there's an age of consent for people to where it'd be okay for them to consent to sex.
Yeah. Real quick. Let's just hammer out definitions because we might actually solve this semantically. What does age of consent mean to you?
Just the age to where I guess the age to like when you
Yeah, can I try?
yeah, sure.
The age where we can say like reasonably that someone has reached like a decent level of long-term decision making and maturity.
Okay, cool. So I think we're more or less on the same page. So my definition would be informed consent or reaching the age of consent is where you're able to make decisions where you understand the long-term ramifications of said decision. That would be how I would look at it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then go for it.
Yeah, so I was just gonna kind of like propose name the trait. So if those same, morally relevant traits were present in a 9-year-old, for example, would you think that it'd be okay for the 9-year-old to consent to sex?
From like a 100%, like if we were God.
Yeah, we just knew. Yeah, we just knew for a
Yeah,
fact.
I would say maybe if we were God, sure. But the problem is that in terms of what exists in people's minds, we can only inductively reason that. And I don't think it's possible to reliably figure out whether or not a 9-year-old has reached a level of maturity. This is also ignoring the entire scientific background of like the development of the prefrontal cortex and how that doesn't really finish to 25. But like, let's say assuming that wasn't relevant, if there was some way for a 9-year-old to fully understand the ramifications of engaging in sexual activity, we would have no way to determine that from an
How
outside.
do we know for an 18-year-old, for example?
Again, we have to inductively reason it.
Right. So if a 9 or 5-year-old were able to, let's say, just write an essay like very articulately, eloquently about the ramifications of sex, and like at the post-formal like operational thought level, like they could do it as well as any adult could. Would that not be sufficient evidence to you?
I mean, we would have to make sure that the child wasn't reciting something from memory given to memorize, so it would have to be like some. But I mean, I guess like theoretically that's possible. Although I don't know if the biological mechanisms exist for that to be possible. I don't know if you've actually achieved.
Right now we're kind of going down this path of whether or not we can actually figure that out. But I just wanted an answer. If we did know, then you would say it'd be okay.
Yeah, theoretically, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, we are on the same page then.
That was quick.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's exactly what I predicted.
Well, sure, but you just have to be careful because a lot of people that want to fuck kids will jump off this as a profile where they'll say something like, "Oh, well, I talked to this 7-year-old and they sound really mature, so I think I should be able to fuck them." Right? Like
Yeah, of course.
Also,
there should be a rigorous test.
Yeah, and also, I'm not even sure if that type of test is even possible for a 5 or 6-year-old or a 7 or 8-year-old or 9-year-old to pass, because when you talk about things like societal influence, because like a lot of the ways that we view sex is done via society, right? So the ramifications of sex are also in some level societal. For instance, the idea that you feel used up as a female if you have sex at an early age, that's probably a societal thing more than some type of innate biological thing. So that's something that I don't know if a 9-year-old can truly understand that, even if they're really intelligent, if they haven't had enough lived experiences yet to be part of a society that has these types of expectations, you know?
But if a 9-year-old did actually write about that, like articulately, eloquently, and like actually demonstrated that concern that you're just bringing up, then you would say they sufficiently.
I mean, like, to be honest, you must be able to develop some test that I'm sure at least one person could pass, but it's like such a niche case that like on a pragmatic level, I don't know if we would ever enact something like this.
No,
Yeah,
I agree,
so
100%.
At that point, wouldn't it just be basically like taking the consciousness of an 18-year-old and just placing that into the body of a 5-year-old?
Kind of, but again, like there's actual biological development that happens in the brain that makes that not totally possible.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a possible or plausible thing. I just mean, like, in theory, though, there is a test that could exist. I believe that's true. If at
Yeah,
least
I mean,
if you're
in
reasonable for
theory, yeah, in
to-
theory, there's one that could exist because 18 years old, for some people, there are probably people that are ready to have sex and totally understand everything before 18. And I know for a fact there are people that aren't ready and past 25. like,
Yeah, for
so
sure.
I mean, like, yeah, the age of consent is I don't want to say arbitrary, but I mean, like, there are people that can probably go above and below. It's just kind of where we've settled on in different countries.
It's just an association between, like, the stages of your cognitive development. Like, most, like, from 12 to, like, adulthood is the, like, what is formal operational stage, and that's usually, like, no one, I don't know of a country that goes lower than 12, but, like, 12 is, like, and at least in Japan, is age of consent, and, like, 18 would be, like, well, you'd keep only 25, but that's, like, the highest bound. So
Well, yeah,
seems
because
to
I'm saying it's
correlate
not
with
even
that sort of-
necessarily like cognitive development as well, right? Things like understanding. So sexual activity can carry with it the risk of, for instance, pregnancies or STDs. Like there are people that go their whole lives that aren't really capable of fully understanding the ramifications of having a child or, acquiring some sort of sexually transmitted disease. Like I mean, so it's not even necessarily just a biological thing, although the biological thing plays into it as well. It's also kind of like reaching a level of maturity that involves understanding ramifications of actions as well.
Yeah. I'm just saying those things are associated with that sort of cognitive development. Like, you unlock the ability to think abstractly, logically, rationally, and that sort of like
Sure.
yeah.
Sorry, just to clarify one thing, Destiny. So you would say you pointed to the undeveloped prefrontal cortex or whatever. So you would say that if a 25-plus-year-old didn't have full development of the prefrontal cortex, you wouldn't be okay with them consenting, correct?
That's a really loaded. I don't like to make normative claims ever, but I mean, like in most systems, I would say that the person probably shouldn't be engaging in that type of activity. I mean, we can be more realistic and we can point to say people with certain types of mental handicaps, right?
Yeah.
Would be the analogous scenario where there are people that could go their whole lives without really truly being able to understand the ramifications of sexual activity. This is why we assign like wards and guardians to mentally disabled people so that they're not taken advantage of by other people.
Yeah, same. I just wanted to some disabilities are more extreme than others, so I just wanted to pin down the prefrontal cortex.
Sure.
What about your own 9-year-old though? If you had a 9-year-old girl or boy,
What about it?
what would you say if they were mature enough to have sex?
I mean, if there was a 100% reliable test that could 100%, I mean, I don't think this test can exist in the real world, but I mean, if it did, then, I mean, logically.
Well, now with 100%.
What?
Well, now with 100% certainty, because I mean, nothing like that actually exists.
Well,
Except
but
for mine,
that
yeah,
was our theorized test, was like a 100% certain test, right?
Yeah, but would you not accept a 99.9% certain? Like, at that point, that's like, because you're making that assumption
hold on.
with
Yeah,
your 18-year-old anyway, right?
Well, we got to be really careful because if you want to shift from a conversation of hypothetical ethics to pragmatically like applied ethics, now we're in a very different territory. So hypothetically, if you were God and you could determine if somebody was ready for sexual activity at 9 years old, then yeah, sure. But if we talk about pragmatic implementation and the test is say like 99% positive or 99% accurate, I don't know if I would accept that in society we should have, most like 9-year-olds that pass the test having sex if 1% of them are literally getting raped, because it seems like that could manifest in a whole bunch of really fucking bad ways. So no, I'm not sure. And also, I don't know if 9-year-olds need to have sex. Like, there's a ton of other things that 9-year-olds should be doing. Most of them aren't even interested in sex yet. They haven't even begun that like descent into puberty and shit. So
yeah, I mean, but there's things like precocious puberty and stuff. But anyway, that's sort of besides one of those fringe cases. But well, the point is, it's like you would accept like an 18-year-old because of their mental development, like associated with cognitive ability and like the ability to appreciate consent and the ramifications of it. The long-term ramifications.
I mean, kind of. I mean, I don't think I think 18-year-olds are pretty fucking retarded. I don't even know if at 18, but yeah, go for it.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying, or 20, whatever the case might be. But because they're demonstrating their reasoning capacity to understand those concerns, informed consent, and the long-term ramifications. But if someone of whatever age was able to do that at the same level or even a higher rate, it doesn't really matter the age; it just matters that sort of capacity to do so, right? And I'm saying if a test could reliably, super reliably, be able to pinpoint like someone's capacity to do so, then it's like, I don't know why you would object, because we're sort of just we are drawing an arbitrary line somewhere, but you're still making the assumption that an 18-year-old or someone at 25 can
I guess like
Yeah,
maybe
you
this
see-
might be I might be intuitively feeling this, which I would argue is
Yeah.
bad. But like it feels to me that like the capacity, if somebody at 18 years old has sex before they're ready for it, that can be a damaging thing. If somebody at 9 years old has sex before they're ready for it, that can be like a life destroying thing. That's what it
So the
seems to me.
Gotcha.
risk with that is
Yeah,
a lot
that's
higher.
yeah,
So
yeah. Like if
you would have
somebody's
to
like
calculate that.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's kind of my. I guess I could be wrong on that. I would really to truly make that argument. I would need to know
Mhm.
outcomes. But yeah, it feels like somebody fucking up
Yeah.
with that at 9, getting like fucked, is going to be way fucking horrible for that person's life compared to like an
Yeah,
18-year-old
sure.
having sex.
That's
Truly.
what I was trying to argue for earlier, but I didn't really know how to articulate it. And I didn't know how to express it. But like to me, that just I totally
like,
agree with that. I don't know.
I'd like to at least like ask, like, how did this conversation even come to fruition in the first place?
Oh, it's because we're having a discussion about Muhammad having sex with a 9-year-old Aisha.
That's the way to do it. Also, I just wanted to plug in. Hi, Destiny. I'm a big fan. Yeah.
Wow, cool. For the Muhammad stuff, or thanks, I appreciate it. Sorry, that sounded really sarcastic. I didn't mean it something.
That was good.
The Muhammad stuff is like really weird.
Wow, cool.
I know that people
Wow,
like to
cool.
rag on Islam. There's a lot of good reasons to shit on a lot of religions, Islam included. The Muhammad stuff is really weird. I'm not comfortable. I don't think it's intelligent to judge past people based on current morals. I don't know if Muhammad's wife was like 9 or 12. I know it was some really early age that everybody likes to look at and say it's super fucked up. But even in the U.S., like even like 50 or 60 years ago, like 14-year-olds and shit were getting married off to like adult men and whatnot. So I mean, we don't have to go that far back into our own history to say that like people pretty much by what like 12 or 13 are ready to start pumping out kids, and we would do that shit back in the day. So I would say you should proceed with caution if you want to judge older people based on our current moral system.
I mean, I guess so, but I feel like I feel like this is different in this case because at least with Muhammad, they're claiming that he's the perfect man and that he is moral and he is just and that he is closest to God. So obviously there's going to be an issue here because if something is true and if something is right, it should transcend trends, you know?
If you're religious, yeah, I guess it would be. Or not, I shouldn't say that. I mean, there are people that believe that even who are a-religious. Yeah, I don't know. Fuck, religion is fucking stupid. But yeah, I mean, I can definitely see the problems with that, sure. I mean, like, the Bible has, like, rules for owning slaves and shit, too. And I don't think people look down on, like, Jefferson, you know, for, like, raping his child slaves and shit, even though if we were to judge a lot of our past heroes by our current morals, a lot of them would fail miserably.
Of course. And I think that's just really a product of not brainwashing, but I think it is a product of our culture. And so I think
Indoctrination.
now, at this age, we're starting to actually look at our founding fathers and seeing them as people rather than idols to be worshipped and praised. I mean, they made very major contributions to our society, but at the same time, we can't let them get off with immoral behavior.
Like justifying slavery, etc.
Yeah, like we acknowledge that that's wrong and that they were completely not good in that and that they're fallible people and that they're not perfect. But the problem is when you have Muslims trying to say that Muhammad is the perfect being, you should be looking up to this man. And that is just something that is not.
Well, so like the way that I would say this is that I would have like a variable. So if I was a Muslim, what I would say is that Muhammad didn't teach. Oh, I feel really uncomfortable making this argument. I should grab a Muslim to do this for me. But like what I expect the Muslim's argument would be is that Muhammad says that it is virtuous to take a wife at an appropriate age and father children. Now in his time, that appropriate age was fucking 9 or 10 or 11 or 12, whatever the fuck it was back then. But in our time, Muhammad would say that as society grows and changes, now the appropriate age is like 16, 17, 18, 19, whatever fucking country you're in. That's what I guess. That's what I would guess Muslims today would say, that Muhammad didn't advocate for taking 10-year-old wives. He advocated for taking a wife early as society would allow, and then doing it in that way. That would be like based on the Muslims I've talked to, that would be my understanding of how they would argue that out.
Essentially, you're trying to you can't really disparage Muhammad for his for the environment that he was, came up in or grew up in, because that's just how the culture.
Yes, but
you shouldn't really you can't hold him to the same standard that we would hold people now because of the different relative morals and that's.
I mean, I can though, because you're claiming that.
I'm saying he can't be culpable. Well, sure, if you're appealing to the doctrine and you believe, right? But,
like if I'm looking at it purely through that lens, that's my issue there. If Muslims like concede at the point that what he did was wrong and that he was not perfect, then I would be totally okay with that,
Well, but
or
I
at
don't
least
think
somewhat
Muhammad
okay.
can be not perfect, right? Same thing with like Jesus. I don't think these are people that can have flaws because your entire religious doctrine is built around them, right?
Yeah, so that's why I have that major issue and contention with Islam, or at least the Sunni interpretation of it.
Sure, but that, I mean, that would be where hopefully you would get hadiths that would step in and kind of like recontextualize that statement so that Muslims aren't trying to take 9-year-old wives. I could be wrong, but I don't think that happens a lot in the U.S. Where I think isn't it generally like Christian people like in Alabama and shit that will try to take like the really fucking young wives. I feel like Muslims in the U.S. are pretty progressive compared to a lot of Muslims in say like the Middle East, especially the Gulf states. But
Yeah, dude,
Yeah.
you're on point.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, yeah, it's a problem, but like the goal. I mean, like, there's either two ways to go. The one, you say like your religion is bullshit, like fuck off, which is not going to happen for most religious people. Or two, you try to find a way to interpret it through some hadith that points you into a direction where you can live a virtuous life that abides by societal standards today, which means not fucking or marrying 9-year-olds, but also adheres to the life that Muhammad lived in his past, which means taking a wife at an early age and fathering children to do whatever for Allah or whatever. Right? That would be my guess.
I suppose so. It's just I find it very disconcerting and intriguing how you have liberals and progressives in our society trying to say that Islam is a religion of peace and should be accepted when it's not. It really isn't. Like it has a lot of components that do not bode well for a
Well,
Western society if we were to accept it.
Progressives' defense of Muslims, I think, has to do more with the defense of Muslims than it does with the defense of Islam. I mean, when somebody says like Islam is a religion of peace, I mean, any religion can be a religion of peace and it can be a religion of war. I think that the reason why people tend to defend, at least progressives tend to defend Muslims more often than not, is because Muslims are usually attacked for being brown and not for being Muslim. If you look at Christians in the United States, if they were, or I can say Christians, evangelicals, or Republicans, for instance, if Republicans weren't racist, they would actually find a massive amount of support from more traditional Muslim communities because their values actually align very closely with Christian values. The idea that women should be subjugated to their husbands, the idea that children should be super obedient, the idea of Sharia or religious law. These are all ideas that Christians are absolutely in love with, but because Muslims are brown, they can't see past that, so they fucking demonize the fuck out of them for being part of a different religion or whatever. That seems to be the way that I feel, at least. Like, if you look at, for instance, if you hop on like Lauren Southern's Twitter and you look at her making fun of Iggy Azalea or whatever, I don't fucking remember, for like wearing not enough, for not wearing enough clothes and that she deserves to be objectified. Like, any argument that a tradcon, that a traditional conservative is going to make for covering up more and not being a slut of a woman, that's going to be the same argument that a Sunni will make for a woman wearing a burqa. Like, they're the exact same. The only difference is the exact amount of clothes you want them to wear. So I mean, I don't know. I get pretty irritated when I see Christians act very very judgmental to Muslims when they're really just like one step away from it.
Yeah, like I understand that, and it's very humorous to me, actually. Like, I mean, personally, I don't have a problem with Muslims as people. I have a problem with their culture and I have a problem with their religion and how they express it. And I feel like because they're treating it like it's an immovable force, that is a huge issue. Like, no matter what you believe, eventually you're gonna have to evolve in
Yeah, I
terms of
think.
like personal stuff like that.
Yeah, and I agree. And I mean, like, there's two ways to do it. The first way is to abandon your religion, which is almost impossible depending on the age of the person and how much of their life is built up from that religion, because you're asking for them to fundamentally reinterpret reality. That's very fucking hard for some people to do. And the type of people that would do that sort of introspection probably aren't going to be religious anyway. So you're already selecting for a group of people that are less likely to engage in this type of introspection. So if we put that aside, the only other thing we can do is find ways for you to view your religion through a different lens. And that seems to be the more effective approach, a more reasonable approach. So for instance, if you take a Christian, like, how can I possibly get a Christian that like reads, scripture and reads, say, like Genesis? How can I get them to believe that the planet, that the universe is, 3.8 billion years old? There's no fucking way I can do this. Well, actually, a lot of Christians today will read Genesis and go, well, actually, this is kind of like a story. It's an allegory for how the universe was created. So in that way, they can both keep their stories and they can keep holy to their faiths or whatever, but then they can also kind of interpret things through a more modern lens that brings their views more in line with the modern world. And then that would be what I would point to. I would hope the same thing could happen with Allah or Yahweh or whatever fucking religious indoctrination I'm sorry, 13 billion is not 3.8, but whatever type of religious shit you're into.
Yes, I concur, and I hope that is the case, but I'm very doubtful of it. Also, so like I feel like the topic's probably been beaten into the ground at this point. So like, I guess I could if you don't mind, if I could bring up another topic, if you don't mind.
Yeah, what topic? Not abortion, not abortion.
I was gonna ask something before we do that. Did we take into consideration the lifespan of the average person back then?
Lifespans haven't
Yeah,
really
I
changed
did,
that
but
much.
at the same time, 9 is still rather young.
Sure,
At
lifespans
that
haven't
age,
changed.
you're
I don't
probably
know.
not even
Remember
menstruating.
how society was back then, though?
Yeah, Kate, there's a lot
I
of different
do,
things.
but even then, 9 years old, even back then,
Oh,
was
I don't
still
have my
considered
fucking push to talk on.
still really young.
Keep
They
in
didn't even
mind.
have their period.
Yeah,
at
Reasons
that
of
time.
why wives were at a really young age back then.
Okay,
I'm
here,
sorry,
real quick. There's a couple things going on. Real quick. One, lifespans haven't changed that much. Life expectancy takes into account things like infant mortality or death due to disease and whatnot. That has dramatically changed. So that's one thing. Just real quick. Lifespan and life expectancy are two very different things. But I'm sure you mean life expectancy. So the second thing for life expectancy, it was popular to make a lot of fucking kids back then for a variety of reasons. One, because they can actually help you work. Two, because a lot of them wouldn't actually survive to older age, so you would want to have a lot of kids. And then three, people would start having children younger because they weren't really doing as much. Nowadays, we educate the fuck out of our people. Well, like if you're born, you're in school until you're at least fucking 18 years old, right? You spend 8 years or 6 years in whatever school, 2 years in middle school, 4 years in high school, and then sometimes you go to college. If you're like a 9 or a 10-year-old and you're not fucking doing, like, you don't have anywhere near as much education back in those days. A lot of people didn't even learn to read or write. So you're literally just walking around and doing fuck all as like a 7 or 8-year-old. I mean, I live in the Midwest in the US. There are a lot of like 10-year-olds I know that like drive trucks around on farms and shit and can do like farm work and whatnot. So it's not completely inconceivable. Were they what?
I said, were they fucking?
I mean, I don't know. I didn't see them do it. But I mean, I'm saying that, like, if you've known kids that have worked on farms, like, you can find kids that are like 11 or 12, like, helping their parents do some pretty intense shit. Like, I watched like a fucking like 12 or 13-year-old kid helping their parents, and they were like breeding their fucking horses. This shit was like fucking traumatizing to me because I'm like a little city kid. I couldn't imagine that shit. So it's not like totally inconceivable that a 12 or 13-year-old that doesn't like spend all their time going to school, you know, might start to have like a fucking family or whatever. I mean, it's possible that back a long time ago that was just more possible to do with the way that society worked back then.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Cool.
Yeah, I suppose so in that situation. But like, here's one thing I wanted to ask you.
Please don't be about abortion.
Like, because
yeah, go for it. Please
do
don't be
you
about
remember
abortion.
that?
Please don't be
like,
about abortion.
do you remember that interview with Amos Yee that you did?
Oh yeah.
I was wondering, how did you like? I read in the comments a lot of people were asking why you didn't take the approach of correcting him and saying that it is indeed harmful and that there's studies that back up that claim.
I thought I did. Wait, for what? Wait, for what specifically was harmful?
Yeah, when he made the point that it's not harmful to children, so it shouldn't be an issue, but you took more of the approach of
he made the point that most children come out of it being okay, but that's only some of them that get fucked up. It's possible that there's research that says that most people are fucked up from it, and not everybody comes out okay, but I don't even think I needed to go to that length to make my argument. It wasn't really, knowing that doesn't actually change my argument for whether or not it's morally right or wrong, so I didn't feel the need to go that far. Also, when I'm having conversations on ethics, especially kind of like abstract or hypothetical ethics, digging in empirical stuff against somebody that spent their whole life researching that shit can get very fucking scary. I think I made my point against him and his kind of like weird brand of like consequentialism. I think I made that point very well and very strongly. But if I start digging into research and he starts bringing up like very esoteric studies that I've never heard of, that weakens the fuck out of my position. Like, for all I know, he's got like some clinical studies that I've never heard of where he's like, oh, well, look, here's this, blah, 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 blah. You know, 100 kids were interviewed and 99 of them had a good experience with child sex. And like, at that point, what do I do? Like, I have to concede immediately that I'm not familiar with that study, and then it looks really bad to my position. So when I'm having conversations of more kind of like abstract, like ethical ideas, I don't like to dig hard into empirical data, especially if I don't need it to win my argument. That's kind of how I feel with it.
Oh, I see. So yeah, I just wanted clarification on that. Like, I mean, because I couldn't even sit through the whole interview with that because I was honestly very disgusted. Like, I am hoping that guy is a troll and that he doesn't actually believe that child sex is okay.
Yeah, I mean, I have no way of possibly knowing. From my conversation with him, it kind of sounded like he just has like his way of viewing the world. I don't know if he's personally a pedophile or not. I'm not fucking sure. I have no idea. It's obviously, it starts to get pretty suspect when people, you know, like when somebody, was it you that asked it? It was like, how did this conversation start? You know, when somebody comes into a room and they're like, all right, guys, we need to talk about whether or not it's okay to fuck 6-year-olds. You kind of have to wonder, like, why are you choosing to dive into this topic so much? Because it makes you wonder after a while, but yeah.
Yeah, because I was kind of like, did someone say it was okay? Because I'm gonna rip them a new asshole with that one, because that's not okay. Like, that's
It's
just
just
not
never meant to
something.
get this far. It was never meant to go this far. I don't know how it did, but it somehow did. And now
Well,
here we are.
I think the conversations are really good because the reason why I debated Amos is because when Amos was making his rounds through the skeptic retards, what I realized was that people have a very poor understanding of what consent means, or more importantly, what informed consent means. Like a lot of people, for instance, were just looking at it based on outcomes. So like, well, as long as it turns out okay most of the time, like consent is whatever. As long as you say yes or no, it's fine, without really understanding that. Well, no, people need to be able to assess risks and whatnot as well, even if things do
Yeah.
turn out okay. Like, except for like some exceptional circumstances where we kind of have to take point, for instance, like vaccinations or something, because it would be too late to make that decision at 18. But yeah, I realize that a lot of people are really poorly, or have a really poor understanding of how consent or informed consent works in general. And I see this a lot in a lot of communities. And you see it a lot today with like the rape culture shit, with the MeToo movement and everything, where people will point to some men, like the Weinsteins, that, like, well, he never actually put her in a dark alley and fucking raped her, so it wasn't that bad. It's like, oh, okay, that's not really how that works. But so yeah, that was the reason why I'm interested in the conversations, is just to expand on people's ideas about consent.
I see. So just to throw something out there, um, how exactly do you feel about the Me Too movement? Do you think it started off okay and then it just devolved into degeneracy, or do you think that it was always a very moot
There
thing
are
to fight
two groups
over?
of people, in my opinion, that think it evolved into degeneracy. One are people that like are incredibly fucking disingenuous in the way that they look at society at large, and then two are the people that kind of got like swept along with them. Is it possible that some aspects of the Me Too movement have gone too far? I mean, of course, I would concede that possibility for literally any movement, but we are so fucking far away from existing in a society where we have like demonized the fuck out of these ideas of this kind of like friendly rape and like the super pressuring women into like having sex and whatnot. We are way, and then the amount of underreported rapes and sexual assaults and whatnot. We are way far away from being on the other end, where it's like, oh no, I think we've gone too extreme. Like we're treating, we're treating sexual assault too seriously now, and we're actually getting into a ridiculous thing. People always point to these like one-offs or whatever. You see MRAs talk about like false accusations are more common than normal accusations. Like what? The data for that is like sketchy at best, and a lot of it has been ripped to shreds. Like, yeah, I'm not. I don't think we're anywhere near the part where it's like, oh, we've gotten too extreme in the Me Too movement. Like rape is solved. We need to stop.
Yeah, like I see how it is. Like honestly, I thought the Me Too movement was a good thing, and I was hoping it would go in the direction of actually addressing the pedophilia that's rampant in Hollywood, and not just focus on adult women or 19-year-olds getting up and trying to get a job and stuff like that, and being taken advantage of
Well, I
because of
mean, there
that.
could be like another movement for it, but I think the Me Too thing was generally meant to address like sexual assault in general amongst women, not focus on pedophilia related stuff, especially because the sexual
Yeah,
assault thing is way more broadly experienced in society than just like pedophiles raping people in Hollywood or whatever.
yeah, I suppose so. It's just I thought that it would open up a whole new can of worms, and it would just, whoosh, like
Yeah, but like
just
that's a
start.
conversation that's not very interesting, and it's a conversation that barely needs to happen. Like if somebody were to blow the lid off of a bunch of people like raping kids in Hollywood, I mean, like I imagine 99.9% of people would be like, whatever, that's not a, or no, I'm sorry. They would be like, oh, this is really fucking horrible. This needs to change. Whereas when we talk about a lot of things related to the Me Too movement, like should a guy be able to ask a girl 15 times if, she wants to fuck when they're at a party and they're alone together? A lot of people look at stuff like that. Still today, a lot of people look at that and they're like, well, that's not really that bad. Like the girl can still say no. And that is an issue where a lot of people's ideas in society about what constitutes like sexually aggressive behavior or putting someone in a sexually uncomfortable spot, that's like a hardcore disagreed upon thing that I think needs addressing, that a lot of people still disagree on, that shouldn't.
You're not
Yes,
allowed to ask females questions.
Yeah, so like what that guy just said, I can't tell if he unironically believes that, because he might be like
No,
an
I'm
incel.
just fucking around.
Oh,
Please,
okay.
please,
I'm sorry, but I've dealt with
please.
so many fucking incels that it's really hard to tell. But like, yeah, like you see,
Yeah, I
like
know.
even that dumb bitch Candace Owens or whatever. Like, what was she tweeting? Like, oh, I don't know if you can ever hire a female anymore. Blah blah blah. Because like, oh, come on, dude. Like, really? Like, people go way to the other fucking extreme on this shit, and it's like, okay, I don't know. It seems like conservatives do this like snowflakey shit the most, where they get like super ass painted about everything while calling everybody else snowflakes. It's very interesting to me.
yeah, it's basically like the what was it called? The shoehorn thing, where it's like it starts at different sides and then it ends up pretty much devolving
Horseshoe
into the
theory.
same thing. Yeah, horseshoe theory. I'm sorry, I'm such a dum-dum. But yeah, that's basically what's going on here. And eventually, we're just gonna have a repeat of how things work. I guess that's the cycle.
Well, no, I think we've done a good job at socially addressing and outing a lot of behavior that used to be considered okay, but is no longer considered okay. And I think we've done a good job at that. You've seen the video of fuck, there are so many videos of this kind of shit happening. Who is the really old, friendly Irish guy that was on like American Idol? Does anybody know who I'm talking about?
I know it's not Simon Cowell. He's definitely
No.
there.
It's like an old, friendly Irish dude. Someone in my channel said it. But like,
Matt Dodd.
I don't know. There's a video of the guy literally just like grabbing a woman's ass on TV. Like he just like does it right next to him. And Louis Walsh or whatever. He just like he just like does it. He just like grabs her ass like on public TV, like on camera and everything. And he's like, oh, you know, just doing my guy thing. And it's like that type of behavior.
What?
Hold on. What are we using? Degenerate text?
No, general text would be okay.
So when stuff like this can happen publicly, and like this existed for years, no attention was brought to this until like.
Yeah, didn't the chick respond like smack his hand away or no?
I linked it in chat. It's like 30 seconds long. Like you can see, like if shit like this, if people think this is like acceptable stuff to do publicly, this is a really big deal. This is not okay. Like this is insane shit that people think this kind of stuff is okay to do publicly. So that's why I'm more interested in having this conversation publicly than like pedophiles in Hollywood, which is bad. But again, like I don't think anybody would think that, you know, pedophilia in Hollywood is acceptable. They just don't know about it. It's a different kind of thing, you know.
I mean, I suppose so, but it would still be nice to actually, you know, expose it and let more people know about this. Because now that you have this whole thing where you have this opening where it's like everyone is spilling secrets, now you can start getting these people to start doing it. Because these kids aren't being given a voice, and the ones that have grown up and have held on to that pain, they're not really able to really speak or anything like that. Because there's that fear that people are going to say that they deserved it, or that if it's a guy and it's a girl, then the guy asked for it. Like, I just think it's one of those things where I feel like it should branch off into many different things and address many different things.
The problem when things branch off is that if you don't keep things focused, you start to lose sight of like your original thing. And then when you branch into too many things, nothing really happens.
I wouldn't say that. Like, I mean...
Well, like, an example of this, I would say, is, like, look at, like, what happened to Occupy Wall Street. I don't ever know what their specific mission statement was, and they ended up broadening their shit to so much, like, random corporate tax-related stuff. It feels to me like that was a really ineffective movement. I don't feel like anything really happened there, as opposed to the MeToo thing, which is producing fucking results. I mean, we're seeing people like Cosby, Louis C.K., and we have gotten some pedophilia stuff. Who was the guy in the movie Seven? The famous actor Kevin
Spacey?
Yeah, the guy that like touched the 14-year-old or raped or had sex with the 14. I don't even know what that story was. Right? We've gotten a lot of stuff.
Light on top of it.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of stuff from the movie, and then like BLM that tries to remain more focused on black issues. You know, we're seeing a lot more attention related to, you know, unfair treatment of black people in different types of situations. We've gotten body cams in a lot of states. So, I mean, I think that these more specific movements have gotten stuff done. But when you broaden stuff up to everything, it kind of, I don't know. I feel like it weakens the overall effectiveness of your message.
Yeah, I mean, not make it to where it's like it's still Me Too, but just like give them that attention, be like, hey, this happens too, and then let them get that chance to get their foot in the door, and they can build it up themselves.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if somebody comes out being sexually assaulted as a minor, I'm pretty sure they would have space in the Me Too movement. Again, like the Kevin Spacey person did it. Remember that the big Olympic doctor that was molesting hundreds of kids that went through him. You know, that guy ended up getting called out. So I mean, I'm sure it'll happen as more come forward. But I mean, there's probably more going on in Hollywood that needs like a deeper investigation, like a dedicated thing.
Also, just on the point of things getting generally better, have you read the book Better Angels of Our Nature by Steven Pinker?
No, what's that about?
I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's an interesting book. His main point is just how violence has declined over time, and even though there are some things that might cause us to think it's gone up, the rate of death by violence has just gone down massively. Like in pre-state societies, it was actually higher than it was in the peak of World War II as a rate. And just, you were talking about things getting better just in terms of, you know, basically manners at one point, like how you treat other people. And so just one of the interesting things about the book is he tracks all these different metrics of violence, and one of them he looks at is just the manners. And again, it just shows that everything is in this big, steady, gradual trend downwards.